Good evening. Welcome to NLADA's second virtual Exemplar Awards Gala. I am Ronald Simpson Bay, and I'll be your host for this evening. I serve on the board of directors for NLADA, and I also serve as the acting chair of the Client Council. NLADA is personal, near and dear to my heart because as someone who is just as involved and directly impacted, I believe fully and wholeheartedly in NLADA's mission to provide equal access to justice in the courts. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a marvelous show lined up for you, highlighting some tenacious legal heroes who have redefined justice in America over the past year, as well as over their storied careers. We are honored to share with you their inspirational stories tonight. When we gathered last fall for the 2020 Virtual Gala, we never dreamed that we would be having a second Virtual Gala in 2021. Yet, here we are. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are now thinking about our summer vacations. We are thinking about getting outside of our homes and no more social distancing and having fun with our family and friends. In the meantime, our priority is your safety and the safety of tonight's honorees. We thank you for your patience and your understanding with the virtual platform and your support of NLADA's mission of equal justice for all. Now let's get this party started. I hope that you're wearing your favorite waist-up black tie outfit, that you have your favorite snacks, your beverages, and that you're in your most favorable comfortable chair. And while you're at it, let's have some fun. Pull out your camera. Take a selfie like me, the Selfie King. Post it on all your social media accounts, tag your friends, and tag us at NLADA. Keep in mind, the chat function is open on the right-hand side of your screen. Share your thoughts, greet your colleagues, and do it in the chat box, please. One last quick reminder. If you haven't yet viewed the Social Justice Art Auction, which is just off the lobby on this platform, you're missing a real treat. We have 50 pieces donated by incarcerated men and women from across the country who believe in NLADA's mission to provide equal justice to all. The auction will be open until 1 a.m. Eastern, so you don't need to leave the program to go check your bids, and be advised that the link to the auction is in the chat box. Well, I think we're all set, but now it's high time for me to introduce to you the woman of the hour, the president and CDO of NLADA, Joanne Wallace. Joanne is a personal friend of mine. She's a mentor, she's an advocate, and she is the epitome of what it means to walk softly and carry a big stick. It is my honor to present to you Joanne Wallace, the CEO and president of NLADA.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Ronald, and also for your leadership on the NLADA board and in the equal justice community. I really admire your dedication to justice. Good evening, everyone. While we're still living through the extraordinary times of a global health crisis, we're beginning to see glimpses of post-pandemic life. As most of us eagerly embrace the return of some semblance of normalcy, however, civil legal aid programs are bracing for an exponential rise in cases from the expiration of measures that have helped limit poverty and hardship, such as the eviction moratorium. As courts begin to open, underfunded public defense advocates are struggling to find a way to ensure that people have their day in court, while at the same time trying to figure out how to address crushing case backlogs.
Make sure you get started on that packet, okay, Ms. Pacheco?
Despite the challenges, the resilience, ingenuity, and relentless pursuit of justice by the NLADA community in this unprecedented time
Council, please
has been
state your
truly
appearances.
inspirational. It is so important that we acknowledge and celebrate that tremendous spirit and what is being accomplished in the midst of multiple crises. That is what brings us together this evening. Thank you for joining us to honor and celebrate tenacious leaders for justice and equity. At NLADA, the past year has been focused on ensuring that civil legal aid and public defense professionals have access to resources to address the myriad new challenges facing their organizations and the people that they represent. We launched an online clearinghouse to provide specially curated data, science, and other expertise throughout the pandemic to help programs continue to serve clients while operating safely. We are now providing resources and training to help programs reopen and operate differently. NLADA was in the forefront advocating for emergency funding for civil legal aid to respond to the substantial increase in the need for legal assistance. We help public defenders access federal dollars for technology or personal protective equipment as they worked in
Oh, that.
courtrooms and jails and prisons to reduce the spread of COVID-19 in their communities. And late last month, we delivered a letter to Congress signed by more than 200 general counsel supporting a significant funding increase for the Legal Services Corporation in next year's budget to address the explosion in the multitude of legal complications created by COVID-19. A very special thank you to John Schultz and Brian Tippins at HPE for partnering with us to lead this important effort. As we move to this virtual world, NLADA undertook research to help discern where and how to use the technology that actually advances access to justice. We provided training on representing clients in a manner that helps ameliorate the impacts of the digital divide. And with funding from the Kellogg Foundation, NLADA is working with civil legal aid organizations in Arizona and Mississippi to pilot innovative practices for providing pandemic-related services that advance racial equity. NLADA also launched a new project that will bring us closer to achieving the Sixth Amendment right to counsel in criminal cases. Despite the Supreme Court mandate for governments to provide lawyers to people who are accused of a crime and can't afford to hire an attorney, individuals seeking the appointment of counsel are often charged fees in order to obtain that representation. Many who cannot afford to pay that fee face the prospect of going forward in complex criminal proceedings without counsel. NLADA is examining counsel fees across the country in partnership with the Fines and Fees Justice Center and the Schusterman Foundation. This pioneering project will develop strategies to abolish these fees without impairing already inadequate public defense budgets. At NLADA, we are also embracing this era of racial reckoning to forge paths to expand equity as well as justice. Legal aid and public defense advocates, and indeed the many pro bono partners who work alongside us, have had front row seats from which to witness the significant impact that the COVID-19 pandemic is having on low-income communities and the disproportionate impact it is having on communities of color. Despite dealing with the monumental changes by the pandemic, this amazing community of leaders and advocates turned to NLADA and said to us, help us do more. As advocates and leaders in the equal justice community, we witness and fight against the intersectional symptoms of systemic racism every day. We see the human consequences of these systems, the patterns and the practices. We know the law. Collectively, our deep bench of nationwide experts work in virtually every legal system, as well as all of the other systems that perpetuate racial inequities.
Is relevant.
We have a special responsibility and an extraordinary opportunity to embrace this moment together to make substantial, long-lasting change. In response, the NLADA Board of Directors formed a racial justice task force to build on NLADA's current racial justice action plan and to expand support for members' desire to leverage this time of racial reckoning to advance even bolder, more impactful approaches to fostering systems, institutions, and policies that promote racial equity. 2 weeks ago, we marked the one-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. At the NLADA Board of Directors meeting earlier today, we observed a moment of silence to remember all those who died unnecessarily at the hands of law enforcement. The board then voted unanimously to accept the task force recommendations, including the establishment of a racial equity resource center to drive 3 strategies to eradicate racial oppression on individual, organizational, and systemic levels. The center will nurture transformational leaders, will help NLADA members adopt and actualize anti-racist stances, and it will support NLADA members to own and use our power collectively to drive systems change. NLADA's new Racial Equity Action Plan will be released this fall, so stay tuned. For me, this work is personal. Although I was born a city kid in Hartford, my family moved to a very rural part of Connecticut when I turned 5. My father was among the first African Americans to integrate the Navy. After serving his country in World War II, he used his GI Bill to help get a college degree and brought together his love of music and his love of teaching. But no school system in the city would hire a young Black male teacher at that time. Not one to be deterred, he sent his resume to school systems throughout the state. Finally, a man who led the music department in a small little town in northern Connecticut stood up to those who opposed hiring a young Black man and offered him a teaching position. My father was a passionate advocate for music and the arts in public school systems. When the town council voted to eliminate the music department because they needed space for other classes, he worked with the students to raise money to build not a classroom, but a brand new music building for the town. Because of one courageous leader who took a stand for equity, many at-risk children were able to tap into their love of music to stay in school and earn their high school diploma. My father still reminds us how one man's courage and kindness also changed our family's lives. Each of tonight's honorees are courageous leaders for equity and justice who are making a tremendous difference. We are honored to be able to recognize Jack Salzweigel, Jim Chosey, Teresa Enriquez, Ishmael Jaffrey, and the Beacon of Justice law firms for their impactful devotion to equal justice. We look to leaders to inspire and encourage us. As you hear more from them and about them, I am certain you will agree that these trailblazing individuals are the exemplary leaders we need at this moment in history. Thank you to tonight's co-hosts for your leadership within NLADA and in the equal justice community as well. And thank you to all of our supporters without whom this evening and NLADA's work would not be possible. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Joanne, for sharing all the amazing work of NLADA staff, board members, and all of our community. One of the highlights of the gala every year is the awarding of the Kutek Dodds Prizes. And here to present the award this year is Jennifer Blunt.
Good evening. The Kutek Dodds Prizes are named in honor of the late Robert J. Kutek, a member of the First Legal Services Corporation Board, and the late Kenneth R. Dodds, former partner in my law firm Kutek Rock. The awards celebrate excellence and innovation in public defense and civil legal aid. In 2020, we also considered how the nominees' work helped to advance racial equity. On behalf of NLADA and the Robert J. Kutek Foundation, it is my genuine pleasure to present the 2021 Kutek Dodds Prizes to Teresa Enriquez, Executive Chief Assistant for Recruitment and Litigation for the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office, and the highest ranking Hispanic female in a public defender office in Florida, and Ishmael Jaffrey with a storied 45-year career in civil legal aid. Ishmael currently is working with Legal Services Alabama. In 25 years as an assistant public defender, Teresa has represented thousands of indigent clients and earned a reputation as an excellent litigator and effective strategist, bringing attention to the disparate police treatment of people living in poor communities. She leads the Miami-Dade Public Defenders Racial Disparities and Implicit Bias Committee and has trained Miami-Dade police officers for years about the collateral consequences of arrest. For the past 6 years, she has been the president of Do the Right Thing, a program dedicated to recognizing students for acts of goodwill and fostering positive relationships between law enforcement and children in the communities they serve. Teresa honors human dignity and promotes higher quality of life for individuals who are unable to afford legal representation. She embodies all the qualities for which the Kutek Dodds Prize stands. By age 16, Ishmael Jaffrey had encountered the justice system, been expelled from school, and was living on his own. An episode of Perry Mason convinced him to pursue public defense. He returned to school and eventually got a law degree after protesting that Cleveland State University admit Black students. He then decided he would dedicate his legal career to service of the poor. For 45 years, Ishmael's commitment has never wavered. From his first job at the Huntsville, Alabama Legal Aid Office and subsequently at other offices in Alabama, Ishmael has been a tireless advocate. In 1982, he initiated Wallace versus Jaffrey, a Supreme Court case challenging mandated school prayer. He continually advocated for policy changes at legal services. After 30 years, Ishmael moved into private practice. This work included numerous federal cases alleging civil rights violations. In 2018, the semi-retired Ishmael was pressed back into full-time employment at Legal Services. During the past year, he has carried a huge case file assisting clients affected by the pandemic. As his nominator stated, the work of a legal aid attorney is not for the faint of heart. Despite that, Ishmael would not change a thing. Tonight, we are honored to award him a QTech Dodds Prize for a life of incomparable service. Congratulations, Teresa and Ishmael.
Today, they need to be reassigned. I became a lawyer because I wanted to serve the people of my community. Growing up, we had no access to power. My mom was a seamstress in a sweatshop. My dad worked construction. I had family members that went through the revolving door of the criminal justice system. There were times as an assistant public defender that I walked through the courtrooms only to find my uncles and cousins chained up to other men waiting for their cases to be called. As a lawyer, I never thought of it as me representing them. It was more like me representing us, because there, but for the grace of God, go I. My upbringing planted the seed for wanting to devote my life to helping others, but it was really my work at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office that gave rise to my passion to want to pursue racial justice in the criminal legal system. My work representing clients who had been falsely arrested and convicted is what had the most transformative impact on my view of the criminal legal system. With those cases, I represented clients who had actually been targeted because of the color of their skin, because of the fact that they had lengthy priors, because who would believe them if they protested their innocence? Under the leadership of our public defender, Carlos Martinez, and exceptional lawyers, we were able to vacate over 100 convictions from 2 police departments. This experience caused us to rethink what we do and rebuild what we hope to accomplish. And in rethinking what we do, that is why I became so involved with the Do the Right Thing program, a program that recognizes school-age children for their good deeds and also fosters very positive relationships between police officers and students. It's this mutual empathy that needs to exist before true racial justice or restorative justice is able to occur. I want to thank the NLADA, my work family, specifically Carlos Martinez, who has inspired me, mentored me, and trusted me to do this work, Rick DeMaria, Guy Robinson, Marissa Glatzer for your undying support, and of course my own family, the love of my life, Michael Galix, my 4 children, and my mother, Bertha Enriquez, the ultimate cheerleader. Thank you so much. I am deeply humbled and honored.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank the National Legal Aid and Defender Association, specifically its QTech Dodds Award Selection Committee, for selecting me as one of this year's winner. I would like to offer special thanks to my Legal Services Manager and Attorney, Ann Brown, for her continuing loyal support, including her nomination of me for this award. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention Guy Lescott, Executive Director of Alabama Legal Services, who have been a perfect director in every sense of the word, and whom I'm advised gave the committee kind words concerning my nomination. I had not expected to be nominated and most certainly not to win. I was and remained overwhelmed and humbled by this honor. My entry into a 45-year career of public service was catapulted by a singular catalytic moment. In 1974, one of my final year of night law school classes, I was in a nightclub in Shaker Heights, Ohio, where I had an epiphany. At that moment, I knew what I'd only suspected before, that I wanted to dedicate my legal career to helping poor people, never charging them a dime for my services. I have mostly kept that promise during the ensuing years. Racial equity has occasionally been intertwined with my history. As a student, I had to fight to gain entry for myself and other African American students at my university's law school. Upon graduation, I sponsored bar review sessions to ensure that more of us would pass the bar. And we did. I began working for the Legal Services Corporation of Alabama in the late 1970s. Our office challenged institutional racism in employment, voting, housing, and elections, both our adverse impact and our intentional discrimination grounds. From time to time, we brought class actions. However, these impact cases were always secondary to our service work, which occupied the bulk of our time, energy, and resources. Later political shifts restricted the advocacy work of legal services. In addition, our program was prohibited from claiming or collecting attorney fees. In essence, legal services was pigeonholed into doing only service work. Many attorneys found these restrictions too limiting and left the program. Others declined to seek a career in legal services program for the same reason. I say because service work was my primary reason for being here. One of my proudest accomplishments is never having abandoned my commitment to legal assistance to the poor in search of my own financial well-being. I never entered poverty law with the thought of recognition, much less an award. I entered because I recognized that poor and underprivileged people in need of legal services were entitled to the very best lawyer available. I was determined to be that lawyer. I am beyond gratified to receive this award and proud of the public confirmation that I have indeed become the lawyer I envisioned myself becoming some 47 years ago. I have not regretted for one moment my decision to spend my entire practice helping the poor. It has not been a lifetime of labor, but a lifetime labor of love. Thank you again for this distinguished honor.
And now it is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you the 2021 Exemplar honorees. Jack Salzweigel is the chair and CEO of American Family Insurance, and Jim Chosey is the executive vice president and general counsel of U.S. Bancorp. This award is presented annually to corporate counsel who have demonstrated outstanding leadership, vision, dedication, and achievement in promoting and supporting equal justice in their communities.
I'm Jim Buheim, Community and Social Impact Officer for the American Family Enterprise. It's my great honor to be here today, representing American Family, and even more so, introducing one of NLADA's exemplar winners, Jack Salzweigel. First, many thanks to the NLADA for recognizing Jack in this way. Jack has enjoyed more than 35 years in our organization, the past 10 having served as American Family's chair and CEO. Throughout his time as CEO, Jack has helped American Family move from a largely Midwestern property and casualty insurance company that operated in just 19 states to a national and international enterprise with a uniquely diversified portfolio of distribution channels. In his tenure as CEO, American Family has not only transformed its business operations, it's also transformed its community presence. Jack's vision for investing in communities and tying social impact and diversity, equity, and inclusion to business strategy is inspiring. Throughout his tenure as CEO, we've launched 2 foundations. Those foundations and the generosity of our employees commit more than $15 million annually to nonprofits. That's a steep rise from the $2.5 million we were sharing annually when I started here in 2013. And in 2018, we created the American Family Institute for Corporate and Social Impact, JAC's vision. The Institute provides our enterprise with the ability to go deeper into topics that are important to us, like criminal justice reform, creating programs and partnerships to drive social impact through venture capital work and social partnerships. JAC brings gratitude, optimism, and belief to all he does, but especially to work around social impact and social justice. He's a strong and committed leader and an ally for the marginalized, and he's been a great friend, mentor, and supporter to me personally throughout the 40 years I've known him, and especially throughout the time I've had the opportunity to be involved in this work as well. It's my great honor to introduce one of the 2021 NLADA Exemplar Award winners, Mr. Jack Salzweigel, Chair and CEO, American Family Insurance.
Thank you, Jim. What an honor it is to be here with you today. And I want to also thank Joanne, Wallace, and everybody at the NLADA for considering me for this very meaningful recognition. And I'd like to say really a special thanks to Kelly Thompson, former president of the NLADA Board of Directors, and as everybody here knows, a current Wisconsin State Public Defender. Kelly's been a great partner to American Family Insurance, and she's specifically been a great partner to me individually. She's provided very needed perspective on the issues that people of color face in the criminal justice system and the catalyst that we need to be for change. And I'm really grateful for Kelly's voice and for her partnership and for her friendship. So thank you, Kelly, for all that you do to advocate for those in need. And as I prepared for this event, I couldn't help but think back to the 1-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd and the image of Derek Chauvin, the police officer, and his knee on the throat of George Floyd. And that's an image that really haunts me, and it haunts many of us. And one that continuously serves as a reminder of the important work that we all have right in front of us. To me, the killing of George Floyd was equivalent to really a modern-day lynching and the terror that has really plagued people of color in our country for hundreds of years and is representative of a system that seems very tilted when it comes to equal justice. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but I really believe that. I don't think anyone would argue that we've made progress over the years, but we need to do more. We're still seeing people of color disproportionately killed in the streets, and we're still seeing harsh sentences for minor offenses. You see that every day. We're still seeing a great divide in our country and in our nation, where fundamental rights such as voting are seemingly becoming much more difficult. And we're seeing families struggle to break the cycles, the long-held cycles of generational poverty, a crisis that has been amplified by the ongoing pandemic that we've seen over the last year and the many different layers of impact that that's had on us, but on people of color in particular. To me, this has never been an issue of right or left, of blue or red, of Republican or Democrat, but it's really an issue of humanity. And that's the way I've approached it, and our company approaches it. This recognition means a lot to me, and I view it in a few different ways. Personally, you know, the award generates a great individual resolve on my part. I'm honored and I'm humbled to be recognized, and I absolutely look at this recognition as one for our entire enterprise here at American Family. I have the privilege to accept this award on behalf of our company and the talented people that work in this organization and are committed to this type of work. Though I intend to retire as CEO at the end of this year, I'm going to remain as executive chair of our enterprise, and I tell you that I will remain actively engaged as a leader, as a voice, and a contributor to this ongoing social justice work in our nation and at American Family in particular. At American Family, we're contributing as a venture investor through our Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. We're contributing through deep partnerships and programs through this institute. We're contributing through targeted charitable programs supported by our Dreams Foundation. We're contributing through our voice and government affairs expertise, engaging with the state of Wisconsin to change its expungement laws. And we're contributing through hiring programs focused on formerly incarcerated individuals and ensuring that we have fair chance hiring practices as well. And we're contributing through a full commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Not just because doing so is good for our people and for our communities, but we believe that it's good for our business. As I close, I'd like to really spend a moment just thanking all of you and applauding the work you do day in and day out. Your job in providing access to those in need can often be thankless and incredibly challenging. And I want to express my gratitude in all you do and my belief that together we can make a difference. Myself and American Family, our entire enterprise will remain focused in leading change through gratitude, optimism, and belief. Again, thank you to Kelly Thompson, thank you to Joanne and the entire team at NLADA and all that you do. We don't take this work for granted, and we will do all that we can do to live up to the prestige that comes with this great award. And I leave you with this. If you have sins, make them sins of action, not sins of inaction. We need more action, and that is the entire mantra at American Family Insurance. Thanks again.
As a profession that is keenly attuned to the concepts of equality and justice, the legal community knows that change is hard. It takes courage and leadership to make change, but it is essential if we're going to overcome and eliminate the barriers and disparities preventing us from achieving equal justice. As U.S. Bank's General Counsel since 2013, Jim Chosey has led by example, including by serving organizations such as Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid and Equal Justice Works. He has fostered the expansion of our award-winning corporate pro bono program and has been an ardent supporter of our diversity and inclusion and new equity and racial justice efforts to drive change within the legal profession. Jim has also been a champion of U.S. Bank's Access Commitment, a long-term approach we launched earlier this year to increase wealth building opportunities and redefine how we serve diverse communities and provide opportunities for our diverse employees. While he will be the first to say there is still more we can do, Jim works tirelessly to hold himself, our company, and the broader profession accountable for improvement. So on behalf of the entire U.S. Bank leadership team, I want to recognize the meaningful impact your work has had on your colleagues, your profession, and your community. Thank you for being a champion for equal justice, and congratulations on this honor.
Good evening. I'm incredibly honored to be speaking to you tonight and be receiving the Exemplar Award. I'm also quite humbled when I consider the past recipients all men and women of remarkable distinction and such exemplary advocates for equal justice. I feel hardly worthy of joining such company, and I can only hope that my own work and commitment will measure up in some small way. I'm so pleased to be associated with the National Legal Aid and Defender Association, our oldest nonprofit devoted to excellence in the delivery of legal services to those who can't afford them. As a lawyer and proud member of the legal profession, I can't think of a more noble mission than fulfilling the promise of equal justice under the law. So I want to thank the NLADA, its board, officers, and members for this opportunity to represent the organization. And special thanks to Joanne, Wallace, President and CEO, for your leadership and your service over a remarkable career. You're really an exemplar, much more so than I am. I'd also like to thank my company, U.S. Bank, the law division I have the privilege to lead, and of course, my family for supporting me in my work. You make it all possible, and I'm forever grateful. So I'm the general counsel of a large public company and practice corporate and banking law, and that's to say I'm not on the front lines of the fight for equal justice like the many heroes who work in public defender and civil legal aid offices and in other public interest capacities. But as an executive of US Bank, I have a platform to advocate for our company's efforts to address social and economic inequalities, including the racial wealth gap. My position also gives me influence to promote programs such as we have in the US Bank Law Division dedicated to pro bono, diversity inclusion, equity and racial justice, and well-being in the legal profession. I'm also able to champion frontline organizations such as Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, Equal Justice Works, Diversity Lab, the National Association of Women Lawyers, and the American Bar Foundation. For these opportunities, I'm deeply appreciative, even though I often feel that my own efforts are small and inadequate given the magnitude of the challenges at hand. And in those moments, I try to remind myself that small things can add up to big things, and that as Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. As a good example of this, take the landmark Supreme Court case of Gideon versus Wainwright from 1963, establishing the right to counsel for indigent defendants. The case was first put into motion by the humble act of Clarence Earl Gideon handwriting a petition to the Supreme Court in pencil and on prison stationery, appealing for basic fairness and equity. But for that simple letter, Robert F. Kennedy later observed, the vast machinery of American law would have gone on functioning undisturbed. Fortunately, Gideon did write it, and as Kennedy also said, the whole course of American legal history has been changed. There was another simple act that also ended up playing a big role in the Gideon story. In 1962, Walter Mondale was the 34-year-old Attorney General of Minnesota when he received a letter from Florida's Attorney General inviting him to join Florida's amicus, or friend of the court brief, arguing against the Gideon appeal. Mondale initially threw the letter in the wastebasket, but he later reconsidered and he decided to write back, stating politely, "I cannot accept your invitation." He also explained his reasoning and noted that it may come as a surprise to some that a law enforcement officer is concerned about the rights of defendants, but one of our basic duties is to see that a defendant has a fair trial. Mondale's correspondence ultimately inspired 23 states to file an unsolicited brief opposite Florida's, which proved influential in the case. Indeed, Gideon's counsel, who was future Supreme Court Justice Abe Fortas, referred to it several times during the oral argument, calling it a remarkable document and declaring that, "I am proud of our country that we have this." Well, I'm proud too, and particularly as a Minnesotan. Mondale didn't need to do what he did. He could have just left the Florida letter in the wastebasket. But he retrieved it, and he decided to take up Gideon's cause at perhaps some risk to his young reputation and political future. He thought not of himself, but of his obligation as a professional to help ensure fairness in the justice system. He did what Justice Ginsburg once advised when she said, "If you want to be a true professional, do something outside of yourself." As lawyers, we do well to remind ourselves that the law is indeed a profession. It's not a trade, it's not a business, but it's a profession. And it's an occupation that should be pursued largely for the benefit of others and not merely for one's self. It's a higher calling and a trust for those it serves. As legal professionals, we're the trustees of the legal system, and we have a duty, not unlike a trustee's fiduciary duty, to the beneficiaries of the system and to help ensure fair access and equal justice. Advancing access and equal justice is easier said than done, of course, as Gideon itself demonstrates. Nearly 60 years later, the promise of the court's decision has yet to be fully realized because our system of indigent defense is often overburdened and underfunded. And the same is true of our system of civil legal aid, which programs have too many needs and not enough resources. In Minneapolis, for example, Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid is forced to turn away 2 of every 3 potential clients. Change takes time, of course, and particularly sweeping change such as was mandated by Gideon. But how much time? How long does equal justice have to wait? I don't know the answer to that hard question, but I do know that we members of the legal profession need to keep working at it, even if only one small step at a time. Fortunately, we have footsteps to follow from the likes of Walter Mondale, of Joanne Wallace, and of so many others who have stepped outside of themselves and serve as inspiring examples. And to name just another one, I'm inspired by a young lawyer in St. Paul, Minnesota named Brooke Beskow-Warg. Brooke is a public interest fellow, and she's being sponsored by US Bank and the law firm of Dorsey and Whitney through the nonprofit called Equal Justice Works. She's living her professional dream, working to improve outcomes for families involved in the child protection system in Minnesota, which doesn't require court-appointed counsel in child protection proceedings. I'm inspired by her idealism, and by her commitment, and by the difference she's making. Brooke knows that providing high quality and culturally appropriate legal representation is critical if the child protection system is to dispense equal justice. And the rest of us legal professionals should know it too. The needs are all around us, whether in indigent defense, civil legal aid, or child protection. We need more access, more diversity, and more equity in the system. And the responsibility to make the necessary change is collective, and it falls upon all of us who call ourselves professionals, even those of us working comfortably in law firms or corporate practice, and especially those of us in positions of leadership. If necessary, we should all summon some constructive outrage over the current situation because, as Benjamin Franklin once reportedly said, justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Since its founding, America has continually struggled to live up to its own ideals, including equal protection under the law, and we struggle still today. Writing during the Great Depression of the 1930s, the poet Langston Hughes wished to let America be America again and to let it be the dream it used to be. While for himself and other Black Americans, America never was America, he still found room for some optimism. Today, the gap between our ideals and our reality is still wide in many places, including related to equal justice, and it can be hard to look at. Hard, too, is the ongoing grinding work of trying to close that gap. For myself, I still believe in the dream and the ideal, and I'm ready for my share of the labor. Thank you again to the NLADA for this recognition and for your incredible work. I appreciate it very sincerely, and I plan to use it as further inspiration for my own work at U.S. Bank, taking steps, though they may be small, to promote greater access, greater diversity, and greater equity in the legal system. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim and Jack. Your leadership continues to inspire us all. This is the third year that NLADA is featuring a social justice art auction with our Exemplar Awards Gala. I hope you all had a chance to browse the art auction before the program started and have placed your initial bids. There are nearly 50 donated pieces in this year's auction, each with a unique story. We'd like to thank the artists for their contribution to the auction in support of equal justice. Now, there are a few pieces in particular I'd like to draw your attention to, including Justine Fisher's Lucy Law, which focuses on the death of Eric Gardner at the hands of New York City police. Justine's work is shown at important galleries and typically sell for upwards of $3,000. We are honored to have two of her donated pieces in our auction this year. They deserve a great space, maybe in a law firm like yours, where the message is clearly on display. On a lighter note, check out Obama's Bow, a collaboration by Kathy Tyler and Andrea Morris of the Iowa Correctional Institution for Women. This piece is so friendly as Bo looks directly at the viewer, probably wondering if they have treats. The auction has pieces at all price ranges, including quite a number under $100. I am sure you can find something fabulous to make your own, and yes, we can ship the artwork to you. The auction is closed now, but will reopen immediately after our program and will remain open until 1 a.m. Eastern. Winners will be notified by email tomorrow. Good luck, and we hope you will soon be the winner of one of these incredible, incredible pieces. And now, the Beacon of Justice Awards, which are granted to law firms for their work to promote equal justice. NLADA is delighted to recognize this year's winners for their pro bono work and other efforts to advance racial equity in 2020. These firms are vital partners in NLADA's effort to dismantle racial inequities and injustices. We look forward to our continued collaboration and congratulate the winners for their achievements and commitments to equal justice. 23 firms qualified this year, showing the depth of the private bar's commitment to tackling difficult issues related to racial equity. This evening, we are only able to present a small selection of their incredible work. In order to honor all the awardees, NLADA will proudly publish a digital book this summer outlining the path-breaking work of all 23 firms. So much impactful work making such a difference. Thank you to all.
Deckard has always had a long-term commitment to racial justice, and it's one of the reasons I came to the firm. We've worked with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, ACLU, and other organizations. But after George Floyd's murder, we've had lots of very difficult conversations, and then that transformed itself, quite frankly, to some of the work we do and some of the work that I've invested myself in doing, including on the Voting Rights Matter. I litigated with the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference. And that case came about as a result of the concerns we had after the primary election in June of 2020 that resulted from the pandemic hitting Black and brown neighborhoods much worse. There was substantial reduction in the number of polling places that were open in those neighborhoods. So we brought the lawsuit, and as a result of the lawsuit, we actually had the state, in the general election, there weren't dissimilar reductions in the number of polling places, so that people were able to feel comfortable to vote in person, to do so safely, and to ensure that their voices were heard. One of the most important things that firm has done, and I played a very small role in my case, is representing people who are incarcerated and therefore under the greatest threat, facing serious illness or dying as a result of COVID. So I worked with the ACLU, Abolition Law Center, and other partners to bring a lawsuit against the Allegheny County Jail as a result of conditions that really threaten people who have pre-existing conditions or who are old. And it resulted in an agreement that will allow us to do some monitoring, that there will be some testing, a vaccination plan. There's so many people, and many of them are Black and brown, who lack the ability to get a lawyer, who lack the ability to have the issues that they're concerned about being presented in court. And so that's one of the reasons I strongly believe that this is the work that everyone should be doing.
Pro bono has always been a priority at Kirkland. It's important work that makes a real difference in people's lives and in our communities.
A large law firm with the resources and talent of Kirkland & Ellis can step in and bring justice to a community.
We dedicate more than 100,000 hours to pro bono work for the vulnerable, the underserved, and the marginalized. Too often, these groups are also predominantly people of color.
I got involved in the Maryland HBCU litigation in 2009. I had attended an HBCU and was on the board of an HBCU. I think we put some 30,000 hours in the case. There were 2 long trials. There were 5 mediations, and each of the mediations was multiple weeks long. We had an appeal in the 4th Circuit. When all of that failed in terms of negotiating with the executive branch, I decided we would deal directly with the legislators. We reached a settlement of $577 million, which is one of the largest pro bono settlements in American history. This is going to make a huge difference in the lives of Black students.
2020 was an inflection point in many ways. We took on projects relating to equity in education, criminal justice reform, voting rights, civil rights, and immigration. During the pandemic, we helped small businesses who were struggling and facing hardship. We also worked with clients to set up nonprofits aimed at providing relief to those who were suffering. It's a privilege for us to be able to fight for people who otherwise would have no voice, and to help bend the arc of history towards a more equitable, inclusive, and just society.
The Holloway Project had its origins back in the summer of 2016. The firm asked me if there was something that I thought the firm could do concretely to combat the effects of racial disparities in our justice system. On the spot, knew we would create the Holloway Project.
These 924C sentences, these gun sentences, were never intended to be enhanced on a first offense. Todd Ellerby had 3 924C counts. So the First Step Act was passed in December of 2018. It also made some important changes to the 2 statutes that we focus on in Holloway, which are the Compassionate Release Statute and the 924C statute. When Judge Ammon reduced his sentence to time served, he had served just about 25, so he still had about 27 years left on that sentence to serve.
I always had hope that I was going to get out, but she told me that she said immediate release, I fell down right there on my knees. Tears of joy. It was just unexplainable.
These gentlemen did not need to sit in prison for another 2-3 decades. Doing the Holloway Project, every victory feels incredible because you're so proximate to these individuals who are 3-dimensional human beings. Getting these people home to their families is enormously exciting and moving.
Earlier this evening, during our cocktail hour, some of us were able to tune into a great conversation between Joanne Wallace and our 2 Exemplar awardees, Jack Salzweigel and Jim Chosey, on the way that business can join the Justice for All movement. We will share a link to that discussion after our event this evening. But the conversation was so terrific, we wanted to offer you some highlights right now.
So Jack, as we've been talking about all evening, the last 2 years really has brought much change to the country. We face the pandemic, economic uncertainty, social instability brought on by the racial reckoning in our country that continues today. Your company has been leading in responding to these issues, especially in the context of racial equity. Can you describe some of that activity and what motivated you and American Family Insurance to take on that difficult work?
When I started my career at American Family, there were just a lot of things that happened. American Family had a redlining lawsuit in the city of Milwaukee, and I was in Milwaukee. I came in to actually help with the consent decree that came out of that, and it was one of those things where I vowed, when I saw things happening, I vowed, if I ever run this company, I'm going to do things differently. It was one of those things that you say kind of in a smart way. But as I then rose through the organization and I got to the position of CEO, I realized, I could really make a difference in this work. And so, we started. I've been a CEO now for 10 years. 2011 is when I came in, and really I have made it a point to take all the learnings that I've had around racial equity, justice issues, and actually get them inserted into the fiber of who we are, the corporate soul that we have. And so it hasn't been anything more than that, just a strong personal belief. And then as I found my voice around these issues of justice, of criminal justice reform and equity and things like that, I found that the vast majority of people around me felt the same way, thought the same things, and were right in lockstep. And so it's been a path for me personally and professionally that's been just tremendous.
So Jim, same question to you. What about what has motivated you and U.S. Bancorp to address racial equity in your work?
I would say obviously the landscape of the last few years has definitely been challenging, and we're doing our best to be responsive to that. I think our motivation comes from the fact that banking really is a community-based business. Historically, if you think about it, banks have always been the cornerstones of the communities in which they operate, and it's critically important that we continually respond to, invest in, and really take care of our communities. Our success, as we think about it, depends on having healthy and thriving communities, and communities that are, among other things, just and equitable. So these conditions that we're talking about certainly brought more urgency to our efforts, and with a much sharper focus on racial equity. As everybody knows, the killing of George Floyd occurred right here in Minneapolis, which is our corporate hometown. It happens to be my hometown as well. I live right in the city and not far from where it happened. So the aftermath has been very difficult. There's been a lot of pain and trauma in our community, particularly for our Black community members. And, the social and the economic inequalities have really been laid bare. We've all had a wake-up call. We shouldn't have needed one, but nonetheless, we've had one. And we're trying to view it as an opportunity to learn and grow and to do better and really be better. So the recent events have taught us all we have a lot of work to do, and the corporate community is really no exception to that. We believe corporations can be change agents. They're looked to, I think, now more than ever for leadership and to make change. And the bar is being raised on all of us, and I think appropriately so.
A natural extension of the way businesses advance corporate social responsibility is by helping to advance access to justice, access to legal assistance. NLADA has been working with our corporate partners to find policy priorities where collaboration can advance access to justice in the United States and, quite frankly, beyond at times. These have included efforts to preserve and increase federal funding for civil legal aid and public defense, including the recent letter that you signed with other general counsel across the country to increase funding for the Legal Services Corporation. Can you share why you think the corporate community has a role to play in efforts such as those?
Sure. Thanks, Joanne. It's a great question. I personally think the corporate community and the in-house legal community in particular have a big role to play with respect to advancing justice, and an increasing role, frankly. And personally, I feel a special responsibility in this, for one, as a corporate leader with a platform, but also as a lawyer and somebody who represents the legal system. As I was discussing earlier in the first question, our communities are really the core of our business, and our success depends on these healthy and thriving communities, and communities that enjoy justice and equity. And civil legal aid and public defender offices are critical to those kinds of communities. They work with and support our most vulnerable citizens, and often in very difficult, life-changing situations. Just to take civil legal aid as an example, they might help in areas such as housing, immigration, family law, veterans benefits, the aftermath of natural disasters, things like that. And without that kind of help, without adequate help, people can experience devastating outcomes that create hardship, undermine stability, not only for themselves, but their families, businesses as well. And ultimately, I think the broader economy, if I can extend it out that far. And unfortunately, though, funding lags for these programs. There are just too many cases, too many potential clients, and not enough resources, just stated simply. And the needs have only been increasing during the pandemic, and we've seen that all over the place. So I think we have a big role to play in promoting adequate funding and just, trying to ensure access to justice. And, as one example, as you mentioned, Joanne, annually a group of us general counsels have signed a letter to Congress to support increased federal funding for the Legal Services Corporation. That's an easy enough thing for us to do. Hopefully it's been helpful. I think it has. We can also help locally. For example, US Bank, my company, is a supporter of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid right here in Minneapolis, where I serve on one of the boards, and we work to galvanize financial and other support, both from the legal community, but also the corporate community for MMLA and its work. As well, we also try to support the lawyers in these kinds of organizations as part of the professional community. So, for example, we often invite the MMLA lawyers to join us at US Bank for different programming and events that we do.
What message would you share with your fellow CEOs about the importance of partnering with legal organizations or organizations that work to advance justice?
Partnering with your organization, other organizations that Jim just talked about is really important. And part of it's important because of the learning process that's involved in these diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice issues. The ability to get proximate. Brian Stevenson talks all the time about getting proximate and understanding, really walking in the shoes of those that you're trying to deal with. As your public defenders understand, until you actually do that, you don't really understand what people are going through. And so getting proximate, just key. And the process of listening to your workforce, listening to your vendors, listening to nonprofit partners you have, listening to your customers. And I think you see pretty quickly, this is not a left or right issue. It's not blue or red, Republican, Democrat. This is a question of humanity. It's a question of fairness. This is the most rewarding work that I've done in my career because of the reward, the personal and professional rewards are just unbelievable. As I'm speaking to the choir here, as you know.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both. What wonderful spokespersons for justice.
Hello, I'm Stan Hitterman and a member of the NOADA Board of Directors. I had the pleasure of chairing the board's Racial Justice Task Force that Joanne spoke about earlier this evening. Only NOADA brings together civil legal aid, public defenders, client, community, and private bar advocates under the banner of equal justice. NOADA leverages its reputation as a trusted expert on legal aid and public defense and its incredible network of members and partners to expand equal justice to every corner of this vast nation. The Racial Justice Task Force embraced the power of this unique collective. We agreed we want to be leaders that collectively drive transformational change, that proactively and affirmatively advocate for racially conscious reforms on individual, institutional, and systemic levels. We envisioned a legal system that ensures economic and civil rights for all people to enjoy human rights, liberty, healthy communities, quality education, safe homes, thriving neighborhoods, and access to opportunity, regardless of socioeconomic status or the color of their skin. Toward these ends, we recommended that NOADA create a Racial Equity Resource Center. We owe a huge thank you to all our task force members, our civil legal aid partners at Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and Bay Area Legal Aid, our defender community represented by Brooklyn Defender Services, our corporate advisory committee representatives represented by Merck and Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, and of course, our client council members and the reason we do this work, Ronald Simpson Bay and Rosita Stanley. I would like to encourage you to join the Racial Justice Listserv to receive updates on the center and find out how you can join the effort. Only together can we ensure that the next chapter of civil rights is truly an equitable one for all. As a united force, we are unstoppable.
Congratulations to the 2021 Exemplar Awardees, Jack Salzweigel and Jim Chose. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, I'd like to add a special thank you for your leadership and your promotion of access to justice. Thank you and congratulations to our Kutek Dodge Prize winners and Beacon of Justice awardees for all their incredible work. We are honored to be your colleagues. What an evening and what an inspiring group of awardees. I want to remind you that the entire conversation with Jack Salzweigel and Jim Chose, moderated by our own president, Joanne Wallace, will be available on the NLADA website soon. I also want to remind you that NLADA will publish a digital book this summer, honoring all of the Beacon of Justice awardees for their deep commitment to equity and racial justice, which we will share with all of you. And a very big thank you to each of you for supporting NLADA and for your commitment to promoting equal justice and racial equity under the extraordinary circumstances of the past year. We encourage you to check in on your favorite pieces at the Social Justice Art Auction. If you're on your way to bed, don't forget that you can set your maximum bids and let the computer do the bidding work for you. This brings us to the end of our program. We extend our sincere gratitude for your support of NLADA's mission to bring racial justice and equity to America. and also for the support of our community advocates. And maybe next time we can meet in person. But as we leave and as you depart, I would ask you to think about making a donation to NLADA. You can go to the chat box, the link is there now, make a donation, it's tax write-off, and we appreciate everything that you do. So from all of us to all of you, good night.